The Beyond the Fame podcast is sponsored by Catoctin Creek Distillery in Loudoun County, Virginia. Discover the vibrant taste of Shenandoah Pink Gin, crafted with the unique Appalachian flavors of strawberry and pawpaw. It's a fresh, fruit-forward spirit that captures the essence of Virginia in every sip. Available for shipping or pickup at www.catoctincreek.com. Must be 21 to drink alcohol. This month's programming is also brought to you by the historic Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. As the United States approaches 250 years, there's no better way to celebrate than with 1776 in the nation's capital. As the Revolution rages and the Second Continental Congress struggles to agree, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson make their case for independence from the British Crown. There are just a few weeks left to see the iconic Ford's Theater production that critics are calling rousing and riveting. Don't miss 1776, now playing through May 16th at Ford's Theater. For tickets, visit Fords.org. And of course, this podcast would not be possible without our longtime sponsor, the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. Upcoming featured entertainment includes Bret Michaels on May 23rd. Details and tickets at HollywoodCasinoCharlestown.com. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top artists and entertainers of our time. This weekend marks the 70th anniversary of Indian filmmaker Satyajit Ray's Pather Panchali winning Best Human Document at the 1956 Cannes Film Festival, where it also competed for the Palme d'Or, sparking a trio of films known as the Apu Trilogy, a staple of world cinema history. I spoke to Criterion Collection President Peter Becker about the trilogy's exciting 4K restoration in 2015. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Before we get into the actual restoration itself, explain how a movie like this is chosen to be restored. Because obviously there's so many great movies out there. How did this one actually get chosen for the restoration?
Well, these three have been on the docket for a very long time. These are three of the towering classics of the golden age of art house cinema, and they've been decades in the wake of their negatives having burned in a fire in 1993. And so they've been very hard to see and very hard to see in good versions. So,
talk to me a little bit about that fire.
Yeah, it was 1993 in London, and the film had all been brought there in anticipation of doing some preservation work and some new prints. And I don't exactly know what work was done in London, but in one of those real tragedies, a nitrate explosion burst in the lab adjacent to where the film was stored, and the negatives of the Apu Trilogy, along with a number of other Satyajit and 40-some Ealing comedies that were absolutely essential, English classics, were damaged in that fire and largely destroyed.
Wow, that must have been just heartbreaking for everyone, especially cinephiles. It reminds me, there's a line I think it's Pather Panchali, where he says, "I wanted to be a writer, but now my manuscripts are all worm-eaten," and it reminds me of the negatives are all burnt now. But so how did you find, what print did they end up getting in their hands on for this restoration? What are you using now?
Well, it turned out that they weren't destroyed.
Oh, okay.
We always that they were completely destroyed in the fire. And it wasn't until after that we learned that there was some more material that the Academy had saved. And they had apparently gone to the lab after the fire and said, "Send us everything that you have on the Ray films." And they stored it all this time, even though the film was deemed unprintable, which basically means it's useless from a photochemical restoration perspective. They still saved it, I guess, in the hope that someday it would be useful, or maybe with the sense that, camera negatives, because they are the original pieces of film that pass behind the lens when the director makes the shot, have a kind of a sacred quality, and that they need to be preserved. Who knows why they did it, but they did. They stayed there for 20 years, well vaulted and just the right temperature conditions and all that to keep them from degrading. And by 2013, when we were finally invited to come and look in those boxes, the had changed such that if we could actually scan the film, meaning if the film would survive scanning, we felt fairly confident that we might be able to preserve some of the image that was on it. And this is really where Lee comes into the picture, because he was there for all this stuff. He can tell you what it was like to open those cans and what you found inside. But the upshot of it is that, while the film had burnt sprocket holes that wouldn't have held it on a regular film carriage for, any kind of optical printing, and terrible warping that would keep the film from being able to be nothing. All the splices had been, had melted tape, and it was completely unusable film, so brittle and so dry that it couldn't be unspooled without flaking apart. And that was the challenge, and the people who rose to that challenge were the lab L'Immagine Ritrovata at the Cineteca Bologna in Italy, and they're really specialists in dealing with actual film. They had handled fire-damaged film before. They felt with a high degree of confidence that they would be able to rehydrate the film, and if they would get it to unspool safely, and then we would be able to see what was on it. Satyajit Ray, he's far too little known, but in his time, one of the first majors into what we now recognize was the golden age of international cinema. We had Akira Kurosawa emerged in 1952 with Rashomon. Satyajit Ray emerged in 1955 with Padre Panchali, and then the Trilogy, which release after release gained in popularity. Then, they're contemporary with Fellini and Antonioni and all of these filmmakers whose last be known to cinephiles, around the world, and he's informed by the films are informed by so much work of the. Ray was an omnivorous movie viewer. He loved cinema, and he grew up in Calcutta, which was the Raj, that was the capital of India at the under the Raj, and therefore had all sorts of strong cultural influence to support their all sorts of Western artworks and movies, not least among them. And Ray went to England and lived there for 6 months on a job with his advertising. He watched 99 films with his wife. Wow. And really blew his mind was Bicycle Thieves by Vittorio De Sica.
Of course.
And he went back to Bengal with the idea that he was going to make a film using Italian
like a neorealism type thing, yeah,
in a Bengali village. And that's the these are the films that we see. So what we really think of, if you ask me for particularly the place of these films as opposed to just Ray, I would say that these films represent, in many ways, the post-war flowering of a truly global international cinema consciousness, where people are seeing direct expressions by places that are very far away, and rather than making them seem exotic, they made them seem universal and understandable. That's what made these humanist filmmakers like Renoir, like De Sica. And, we shouldn't forget that Renoir met Ray and inspired Ray to become a filmmaker. Renoir went to India to make a film, The River, with River Garden, which is why Ray met him when he volunteered to go scout locations. But I guess what I'm really saying is that there's a universality to these films, and because of the combination of, I think, their increasingly international consciousness in the post-war period, and I think also the needs for reconciliation in the period after the war. The arts, and particularly cinema, became a very important way of us getting to know each other around the world, and that's how we saw Japan and India, Germany and France, Italy and England and Latin America, and even in the 60s we start to see more films coming even out of Africa, and these are all direct expressions in a reproducible art form that allowed us to literally lay eyes on other places that we might only have been able to read about or see a still photograph from before. and they're expressions that are being made by filmmakers, informed by world cinema, but very, very, very much of their own cultures. And I think that's, more than anything to me, that's what Ray represents, is the arrival on the scene of that global consciousness in cinema.
Absolutely. And when you watch it, his style is very it's not flashy or showy or overly exaggerated with camera moves. It's a lot of times it's kind of a static, locked off shot. Using that frame is usually what happens. The action happens within the frame. He's not moving around.
But his rhythms are really peculiar and interesting. They're not like other filmmakers. Even though the camera work seems very understated, what it sees is really beautiful.
I also spoke with Criterion's technical director, Lee Klein, about the specifics of the restoration process. All right, so you are the technical director for Criterion, right? And you oversaw this restoration of the Apu trilogy.
That's correct.
So when they bring you in, what's kind of the first thing that you look for?
Well, I mean, the first thing we do, whether we know what anything looks like, is we have to see what's out there. So that means, usually you're only as good as your film. So the first thing we have to do is start by finding the most original film, and that's usually the negative. Yeah. In this case, we didn't know that the burnt negative was at the Academy, so what we did was we started looking at dupes that were made from it. They were, positives and negatives made from the negative and subsequent preprint materials that we pulled in from various places. The Academy had some, we had some here in our holdings, and there were also a few things that we found that looked like they could be interesting that were held by the BFI in London, the British Film Institute. Mm-hmm. So, we started looking at most of the things, and we weren't blown away by anything. They were, a lot of the dupes were made quickly and crudely and in India way back when the movies first came out, and they were. I'm sure their resources were what they were at the time, but they weren't really anything that was something you'd want to use for a restoration. It was just material that looked like it had seen better days. It didn't have a great grayscale. It was damaged. It was dirty. It was all the things that you don't want to have to deal with when you start restoring. I mean, you have to deal with those things, but it's the thing that you try to eliminate the most from the equation so you can actually get something good to begin with. So the Scourge, I think we kept pushing, and then we found that these negatives had been moved way back when, after the fire, to L.A., and they were actually sitting in boxes in the Academy's vaults. So, not leaving a stone unturned, we said, yes, we want to see them, and we, hastily pulled in the boxes to the lab we were working at the time, and we opened the boxes to see what was in them, and the cans were opened, and then we literally saw burnt pieces of film, and you couldn't even pick some of the reels up because they were brittle and they were flaking off, and it wasn't something that most people would just put the cover back on the box and say, well, we're not going to be able to do this. But we thought, well, these are here for a reason. Let's try to at least see what's in between the sprockets and see if there's actually a good image there.
Right.
So this was on Aparajito. We found that one of the reels looked remarkably better than the others. It seemed to be one that you could pick up and put on a light table and actually take a look at and evaluate. And what we saw looked pretty good. So what we did next was we persuaded the scanning technicians at the place we were using. This was at Sony in L.A. at their lab called Colorworks at the time. And we said, please, just scan 60 seconds of it, and let's just see what type of image is there. Because that's really the true way of looking at these things is, scanning it in a high resolution and seeing what it looks like under, basically a huge magnifying glass. So we pulled those images in, and we had a look, and we said, whoa, this is pretty exciting.
Do you remember which scene of the movie it was that you saw?
I do. It was a scene where the mom... I remember the mom was washing something.
Okay.
And it wasn't a bright scene. It was like inside at night, or inside with few lights on. So we scanned those and we looked at it and we were pretty damn excited about what we found. But we were probably overzealous because that was not indicative of the rest of the movie. It really, clearly was the best reel of all of the reels of any of the films that were salvaged from the fire. So we got a little excited, and we decided to really, go deep into this project. So we pulled everything in, and we started scanning it, and we started repairing all the negatives in Bologna at our lab there. And we really, we spent the next few months really just getting it ready to scan. And that meant removing sprockets and fixing splices and repairing tears, and it was endless. Everything you could think that you had to do, you had to do. You had to rehydrate the film because it was so brittle and it wouldn't scan right over the scanner. You had to flatten it out because it was warped because of the heat. It was just one thing after another so we put the technicians in Bologna to the test, and we made them do lots of work on it, and we spent about 1,000 hours just on film repairs.
Explain to our listeners, break it down like I'm a 4-year-old, how this actually works. Some listeners that might not be familiar with film terms at all.
Sure.
How does a restoration actually work from a technical level?
Well, in a restoration like this, it works quite differently, really, because a typical restoration is you find the best film, you scan it at a high resolution, and then you do use your digital tools to clean it up afterwards. And there, it can be a lot of work depending on the shape of the material, but typically, it's a workflow. It's been proven. It takes time, but it's pretty simple, and we can go forward and have some beautiful images underneath that.
So in that regard, on a typical one, it's mostly digitally, grading going on.
Yeah, the digital grading and the digital tools to restore, like literally drawing out a tear and replacing it with material that's not torn. Finding a piece of dirt that's there and drawing it out and using clean material from a frame before or a frame after to fix that. Those kind of things. In this case, we couldn't even get to that step until we fixed the film.
Right.
Because if the film wasn't repaired, you couldn't even get a scan out of it. And that's the thing you need to do anything else. So we cleaned it up, we repaired it, then we scanned it, then we use the digital tools to get to where we typically go. And it also meant that we had to use digital tools that we didn't normally use. Like we had to use tools that could deal with warping, which you don't usually get in such a big level when you just are doing a regular restoration. But here we have film that went through fire, so it literally melted. So those kind of things really led to it being very untraditional, and really, at first when we found this film, we honestly didn't know how to handle it. We had to pick up the phone and call lots of people and say, okay, have you ever dealt with any burnt film before?
Right.
Film that literally went through a fire and was pulled out and salvaged, and the answer was pretty much no. Really, who had? And the problem being really wasn't that people hadn't seen this before, because there have been fires in film laboratories before and film salvage, but the people that knew how to work with these things were either long gone or retired.
Right.
So our choice of educated technicians was not really very easy to find.
Right.
So once we found these guys, especially in Bologna, where these people, they've seen everything. They're one of the few places in the world that know how to deal with such a crazy entity. They've got film there that has been, we go there and we walk around their vaults and we say, what happened to this? So they say, oh yeah, you have fire film, yeah, come on, bring it on, we can take it.
Awesome.
So they took it and they did what they needed to do. Now, not all of the film, even though it was in the cans, was repairable, because the fire really had gotten damage to many of the heads of the reels and the tails of the reels, and because depending on how close it was to the heat, depended on how it was affected. So that was something we had to work. We had to really discard quite a bit of the movies because we couldn't really even repair them. Some films were luckier than others. On Aparajito, we did better. We had a lot more. We had about 60-something% of material that we were able to use from the negative. Parabanchali, where we found about 40%. And Apasansar, unfortunately, the number was pretty much zero, because we only had 2 reels of the negative that survived anyway, and they were in such bad shape that they just weren't something that we could correct. digitally or with film repairs.
So what happens to those pieces that were unusable?
Well, I mean, those pieces, they go back in the can, and hopefully one day somebody will have even better tools to be able to work with that stuff. And, as these things progress and get better, those things can happen. But right now, we can't work with those. What we had to do for the remaining 40% of Paradiso was find suitable replacement material. And that meant going back to the dupes and the prints and all those other things to find footage that looked as good as we could possibly find and then sign off on it. So we created this big edit decision list, which is basically shows you what shots are coming from which film.
Your EDL.
Your EDL, exactly. And our EDL told us what we were going to use. So if we couldn't use the negative here, we used maybe source A or source B or source C. And sometimes there was a D and an E.
I got you. So those leftover sequence gaps, we'll call them, were filled in by the duplicate.
Correct.
Okay. Well, do you remember just give me the percentages again of for each three of the trilogy?
Yeah, I think, Peter, wasn't it 65% of Paradiso? Was that what the number? 60%. So 60% of Paradiso, 40% of Parapanchali, and 0%, unfortunately, of Opera Sansar.
I got you. But
which was from the negative, exactly. This was how much we used from the negative. Now, on Opera Sansar, we were quite lucky because there was it was the third film made in this series. He was a better filmmaker, meaning that he had better resources, better labs, better technicians, better editors, maybe better cameras, whatever it was that he could do. The film was clearly better made as an established filmmaker, and it was printed on a piece of dupe positive stock that was really, really good. So luckily, if that was the film that we were missing, we had the best replacement material for it.
Cool. Explain to our listeners, just go into how awesome 4K resolution is, like what it's going to be like for them to actually see something projected in 4K when they come to see these.
Yeah. I mean, if you can see these films projected in 4K, it's the way to do it. I'll tell you why. And not everybody projects in 4K, especially art house cinemas and things like that. But we're getting there. We're all slowly getting there. But, we know that resolution of 4K is very close to film resolution. We estimate film resolution to be somewhere around 5K. So when you do a 4K scan, you really are getting most of the resolution out of that film, especially in original negative.
Right.
So basically what happens is if we do the scan in 4K and the restoration in 4K and show the DCP in 4K, we're achieving the maximum resolution that we can at this point all the way through the project. And if you're lucky enough to see it on a 4K projector, your mind's going to be blown because I'm not kidding when I say that, because when we saw it for the first time in 4K, we stood there sat there with our mouths open watching this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, are we ever going to technology-wise, are we ever going to achieve 5K? How far out do you think that is?
Oh, it's not far out at all. I mean, the problem is there's 8K, and we are doing that. Not we, but people are film companies and studios are doing that when needed. Okay. For instance, Lawrence Arabia, where you have a 65 millimeter negative, which is almost double the size of 35, your 8K really becomes necessary then, because that's really going to get you the most out of it. And as an archival medium, you really do want to try to archive at the highest resolution you can do, and really that you can afford, because every time you increase the resolution of something, your budget goes up.
Absolutely.
And we're not talking about a little bit. 4K is really 4 times the price. 8K is really 8 times the price. It just works out that way. And that also means 4 times the data and 8 times the data. Mm-hmm. So you're already dealing with, if you're dealing with a 2K film, which is 2 hours long, you're somewhere around 2 terabytes.
Man.
Most people don't even know what 2 terabytes looks like. That's a lot of data.
Right.
You're already up to 8 terabytes when you're at 4K. Now think about that when you're trying to move that incredibly large amount of data.
Just to migrate it between hard drives.
Just to get it from one hard drive to another. Yeah. You're talking about a whole night.
Yeah, exactly.
So all those things add up to just what really could be, catastrophic in the fact that you're dealing with so much material.
Absolutely.
And because we had multiple replacement materials on things, we had 8, 16, 24, 32 terabytes of data on one film. It was a lot of data management.
But it's got to be that much more gratifying now that it's done, and the challenge of it must make it that much more gratifying.
Now that it's done, we all look back on it and say we did great. and we're super proud of what we did. But at the time, I think I had almost a couple of engineers leave and a couple of technicians that, I mean, it's like watching paint dry sometimes with these really slow things,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so folks here in D.C. will be able to check out the Apu Trilogy in its stunning new 4K restoration at the landmark E Street Cinema in downtown D.C. And I just thought it would be a cool time to do this with you guys, because also across town up at the AFI Silver, they're going to be unveiling a 4K restoration of The Third Man this week. So that we have two cool options of these great classic films that are going to be looking better than ever.
Definitely. That's really exciting, too. You've got some really good choices to make there.
Were you? Well, I know Third Man at least was in the Criterion at one point. Were you involved with that at all?
I wasn't involved in this new remastering, but I do know the people that did it. They're the same lab that we did use for some of our Apu stuff. They've done remastering us for Don't Look Now and the Nicholas Roeg film.
Oh,
they've done.
That's a wild movie, right there.
It's a wild movie. It's a great movie, and they're a great lab, and they've got some great technicians working there. So I trust that they really did a bang-up job on it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Lee, thanks so much for walking us through a little of the technical stuff, and just personally, thanks so much for all the painstaking efforts to restore these movies. I mean,
my pleasure.
Just to close it out here, what is the importance to you to keep these classic movies alive? I know, Scorsese has been a something he's been stressing over the last couple years, and why dig into the past and revive these things?
The reason is, there's films really just do bring us back to a place and a time, and all these films really mean something to a lot of people. And if you haven't seen them, we're envious of the people that get to see a lot of these things for the first time. I was a person that that hadn't seen Don't Look Now, and for some reason or another, just passed me by. And when I saw it for the first time where we worked on it, I thought to myself, why have I never seen this movie? And, we want people to say that with the Apu Trilogy. I mean, we want to say, why haven't we seen it? We know why they haven't seen it, because they probably haven't looked very good or been out there in good editions. But now there's no excuse. Just go out there and see the Apu Trilogy, and you will be moved and realize that you're seeing a really great piece of art.
Yeah, and some people that might be... explain it to someone that might be kind of ignorant to this idea. Maybe they think that something old is, something they think it's going to look faded and, and grainy, like maybe when they watch an old TV show or something.
Yeah.
Explain to them how it is almost like the notion of time is almost erased now. Explain that it's like watching something that was just shot today once it's restored nicely.
Once you see it restored and in 4K in a big theater, it will be like seeing it for the first time. It might even be better than seeing it for the first time, because now with digital projection and the tools that we use to create these things from original negatives, you're probably seeing something in the theater now that you couldn't even do back when these films first came out. They just look and sound better. We have better ways to show them now, and that's just a fact. Even a great print at the time might not look as good as these new DCPs, and I'm envious of the person that's going to go see these, because they're going to feel like they're seeing something brand new.
Awesome. Well, that's where our listeners come in. Go make Lee Klein envious by go see it for the first time and enjoy it.
Definitely.
Thanks so much for doing it, and good luck on the next project.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.